Hi, Copic in the Craft Room friends. Michelle Houghton here. We've got another image from Craft with Pixels. I talked about them 2 weeks ago when I was coloring up a jellyfish, and now I've got this adorable sea turtle from them, or sea jelly. I should say that correctly. It's not a jellyfish because it's not a fish. It's a sea jelly. Now I've got a sea turtle. And I am a huge fan of sea turtles. I love them to death. And part of that is because I have a swimmer for a daughter, and we call her our sea turtle because she is a swimmer extraordinaire. So this little guy is going to get a series of greens, and I'm kind of testing out what I think is going to work. I want to use some greens and also some blue greens. There's a group of blue greens that are the BG7s that have this beautiful deep teal turquoise color, and I'm thinking about using those. So I want to test those out and kind of make sure I've got something that's going to change up the color on the shell versus the color on the skin or the flesh. And so I'm trying a group of YGs, kind of a desaturated set, the YG6s, and then also some of these BG7s, and seeing what I can do with those. And I looked up a couple of photographs of sea turtles because I want to do something kind of fun with the shell that at least is semi-realistic to what those patterns, because they have these really kind of beautiful, unique patterning on their shells. And so I wanted to use kind of the idea of a real version of that. So I'm going to base this in a single color, and I don't necessarily need a smooth, heavy undercoating. I'm doing some small circles. I've broken out my chisel nib because I've got this big broad area. And then that was a G20. And then I'm going in with that first BG and adding my first layer of texture. And actually, sorry, I've got the first color I'm going to use is a YG. So it's going to start with a YG61. And I kind of paused there, so I was pulling up the image that I had pulled up and make sure I have that beside me. And I'm doing this fan effect with a flick. So I picked 1/4 of each of the little corner of each of those shapes, and then I'm fanning flicks out from that corner. And so that bottom row, you can kind of see where they all started in that upper left corner and kind of fanned out from there. The next one, upper left, fanned out. And then the one across the back, it's from that bottom corner, or the one that's bottom as that turtle's facing me this direction. So, and then around, he's got these other little kind of compartments to his shells around the edge, and I'm kind of going around a C curve, kind of around the portion that's up against the main shell and then out around that left side. And this is all with that YG61. And I've switched over to the brush nib at this point to do those kind of narrower flicks. And I've got a BG72. And this one's really going pretty much in the same places. Now I'm not trying to actually go over that YG61. And especially on where I'm going around these little portions, I'm trying to do that in a smaller amount with the BG72. So smaller amounts here on the flicks. I'm just adding more flicks, and it might hit in some of the same spots. It's going to go in some of the areas that were still that lighter G20. Some of these might get a little shorter. So it's just darkening up, and especially at that starting point, you can see where that's starting to get darker right at that kind of starting point of each of those fans. BG75 is going to be the last color I use on the shell, and it's pretty distinct striping at this point. You can really see those pieces, and hopefully you can see that I've used less, like that I'm not doing as many flicks. So like on one of those sections with that second color, the BG72, I might have done 8 flicks in each compartment. With this one, I'm cutting that down to 5 or 4 even. And then on the little pieces around the outer edge, I'm just barely hitting that edge. The one other thing that I'm doing with that BG75 is there's some tiny corners in between the sections on the shell. And I'm going in and filling those in so that it kind of drops down and in toward the inside portion of the shell. So it gets much darker. Don't forget ever, your paper turns around, so make sure your hand gets to flick in the direction it likes to flick. And then I literally am doing a very light brush over with the G20 on all of those back compartment pieces and all the way around that outer edge. And it was really a super light pass. I'm not scrubbing, I'm just adding a little bit of that alcohol back with that G20 to soften those flicks. Not erase them, just soften them. So then the rest of the turtle gets hit with G20, gets all covered up. And we're ready to get going on the rest of him, kind of the fleshy portion of our sea turtle. So YG63 is what I'm starting with this time. And I'm adding dots. And I'm kind of adding pretty much throughout the skin area. So I'm even going into that lighter portion. I do go through the areas that have kind of those circular little dots kind of already added by the artist. But then I'm adding a little bit more and going all the way out to those edges with this first color, the YG63. So I'm adding that kind of rough texture that a sea turtle might have. Now the one place you're noticing or probably saw that I didn't do the dots was right around his beak. And that part I did flick from that mouth up. YG67 is next, and now I'm going to focus into some areas that I really want to focus. So the darker bottom edge of the turtle, and I'm going into those circles that the artist gave us and filling those in. And then I'm adding a few more around just those areas. The back fin, the one that's away from the viewer, it's going to get darker where it comes out from underneath the shell. So now I'm trying to add those little pieces of shape where the head and neck come out from under the shell. It gets darker, so I keep those dots really close together and then they fade out or spread out as they work away from the shell. The underside of his face, the very bottom edge of his beak. Then I grab a G28 and this I'm going just into those circles. And he's got these little wrinkles on his neck and I go into those as well. Again, this is about pushing some of those areas back and making them pop a little bit. So G28 for those. And I've got a BV25, and what I'm doing with that is, again, this is where I'm pushing that form and trying to give him a little bit of shape. So right against the shell where it's coming out from underneath, dots, and I'm still staying with dots here, but that blue violet is going to cool it down even more and darken it and add those violet tones are going to help create that depth and push those fins kind of back and underneath the shell. Tiny bit of G20, smooth out that beak area because that part I do want it to feel more smooth. A little BG72 on his eye, and then he's pretty much colored up. I am going to fussy cut him and put him on a card. And the background you're going to see is really cool. I did that with my Copic inks, and I will do that here in a future video, probably within the next couple weeks, so you guys can see how I created it. But I just wanted to share this turtle for today. Again, another digital image from Craft with Pixels. And if you like him, he actually is part of a free group of digital images you will get for signing up for their mailing list. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've got any questions, make sure to comment below and I will answer. I'm always checking in and trying to get those answered. Have a happy, colorful day.